So you know what's right and you know what's wrong.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that what you've done is right or wrong?
Wrong, but it had to be done.
Why did it have to be done?
Just
To satisfy your need?
Itzcoatl Ocampo was born on the 20th of March 1988 in Mexico City. 4 months after Ocampo's birth, his father Refugio made the decision to emigrate illegally to California in search of a better life for his family, leaving behind his wife Lilia and infant son. When he arrived in California, he found employment as a dishwasher. 2 months later, Lilia followed in her husband's footsteps, crossing the border with a group of migrants with Ocampo cradled in her arms. Upon reuniting with her husband in California, Lilia faced a steep learning curve as she adjusted to life in a new country. Refugio, meanwhile, found new employment in a plastics factory. After 12 years of residing in America, the Ocampos went through the process to obtain American citizenship, though not entirely legally, as Refugio purchased a letter stating he had worked in the fields of Southern California, which granted him access to a government scheme that eased the citizenship process. After becoming citizens, the Ocampos purchased a family home in Anaheim, which was shared with Refugio, Lilia, Itzcoatl, and his now younger brother and sister. Ocampo attended Esperanza High School. He earned a reputation as friendly and approachable. Although, despite his positive demeanour, Ocampo was on the receiving end of some bullying. His classmates targeted him for his appearance and ill-fitting clothing for someone of his height. He did, however, form a close friendship group, which included student Claudio Patino IV, a charismatic figure who it seemed Ocampo looked up to, almost like he was an older brother. The two seemed like opposites, with Patino being more athletic and outgoing, in contrast to the tall, lanky and timid Ocampo. Ocampo seemed set on attending college after high school, even if it took him away from his friends, but a drastic event would shift his life's focus. Like so many, 9/11 had a huge impact on Ocampo, reshaping his worldview and igniting his interest in the military. Inspired by the patriotism and resolve that emerged in the wake of the tragedy, he found himself drawn towards enlisting. Upon graduating from high school in 2006, Itzcoatl did indeed make the decision to enlist in the United States Marine Corps, no doubt also swayed by the fact his friend Claudio had also enlisted. Stationed at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, Ocampo underwent rigorous training in preparation for deployment in Iraq. He did not take to military life as he thought he would, feeling he had nothing in common with his fellow Marines and separated from his closest friend Claudio.
Buenos días, familia Ocampo. Soy yo, Itzcoatl, su hijo aquí de Irak. Aquí la iglesia está haciendo algo para el Día de las Gracias, Día de los Padres, perdón. Y pues tomé la oportunidad para hacer este disco para Tipa, para decirte feliz día de los padres, perdón. Muchas gracias por todo lo que has hecho, pa, y te quiero mucho.
In March 2008, Itzcoatl was deployed to Iraq as part of the 15th Regiment of the Medical and Sanitary Battalion, tasked with providing supplies and support to troops stationed in the region. Early into his 6-month tour, Ocampo would learn that his father had lost his job. Before departing for Iraq, Ocampo had found drug paraphernalia in his father's car. Refugio would sometimes go to work and not return for the night, and it was believed that he had continued to use drugs whilst Ocampo was away. Lilia informed him that the family had run into financial troubles, and this was not aided by Refugio's sudden unemployment. This news didn't help an already depressing time for Ocampo. Feeling alienated within the Marine Corps, unhappy with his role as a supply driver, but most of all, unhappy not to be serving alongside his friend Claudio. Writing in a journal, joined to be a fucking killer, but then ended up somewhere where I would be saving lives rather than taking them. One day in tour, he loaded and pointed his rifle at another Marine, later claiming it was a joke that went too far. He was cited for misconduct and demoted with a reduction in pay and assigned more menial tasks on top of his current workload. At the end of his 6-month tour, Ocampo returned to Camp Pendleton. Corporal Bonnie Tisdale, who supervised him, noticed a shift in his behaviour, stating before he was disciplined, quiet, funny, and would offer you the shirt off his back or his last dollar. But upon his return from his tour of duty, he grew bitter, depressed, and racked up some minor infractions for petty insubordination. In 2010, 1 month before Ocampo was released from active duty, his best friend, Claudio Patino IV, was killed in action. Claudio and his unit were scouting out a hill when they were ambushed. Upon hearing the news, Ocampo broke down over the phone to his mother. Lelia would later state about the devastating impact of Claudio's death on Ocampo. That's what lit the wick. After his release from active duty in July 2010, Ocampo moved into his uncle's home along with his mother, brother and sister. At this point, Refugio was homeless and living out of the cab of a truck. His brother-in-law, who was hosting the rest of the Ocampo family, refused to speak or see him. Ocampo would still contact his father to provide supplies and talk about life, but what little money Ocampo had soon deteriorated, and he turned to alcohol to cope with daily life. He began doing odd jobs here and there, all the while applying for more stable employment with little success, which damaged his already fragile state of mind. Ocampo's mental health declined, exacerbated by the stresses of unemployment and the breakdown of his family. He began talking to himself throughout the day, mentioned being watched, vivid nightmares of bloody people, constant severe headaches, and on occasion he would search throughout his uncle's home looking for bombs that were never there. Over the next 2 years, he refused treatment for PTSD, believing the diagnosis was incorrect because he was not an active combatant. On the 25th of October 2011, Ocampo visited the home of his friend Eder Herrera, who he'd done some odd jobs with. The Herrera family had previously asked that Ocampo not come to the home anymore on account of his past paranoid behaviour. When Ocampo arrived, he found that Eder Herrera was not home, but his mother, 53-year-old Raquel Estrada, and brother, 34-year-old Juan, were. Ocampo would later say he felt disrespected by the family, and this appears to be the causation for what came next. Ocampo began attacking Raquel, stabbing her multiple times. When Juan came to see what all the commotion was about and witnessed the attack, he attempted to escape, but was chased and wrestled back into the home by Ocampo, whilst he screamed for help, which was witnessed by a neighbour. Once back inside, Ocampo continued the frenzied attack, stabbing both victims close to a total of 100 times. After the murders, a call was made to the police from a payphone over a mile away from someone identifying themselves as a neighbour, stating they had heard the commotion within the Herrera home. This was later believed to be Ocampo himself. The neighbour who had witnessed Ocampo wrestling with Juan mistook this for Eder Herrera. When Herrera was located, he was arrested for the murders. Eder advised he had spent the night at a friend's house after an argument with his family, but did admit that he had attempted to return home only to find police outside, so fled fearing arrest as he was himself undocumented. For the moment, Ocampo had gotten away with the murders, and his friend Eder was imprisoned. On the night of the 21st of December 2011, 53-year-old James McGilvery, a popular part of the local homeless community, had laid down to sleep for the night behind a strip mall in Placienta, Orange County. Unbeknownst to him, Ocampo, dressed in dark clothing and wearing gloves, was watching nearby, just waiting for his opportunity to strike. When he was sure that McGilvery was fast asleep, Ocampo approached and pinned McGilvery to the ground using his knee, and began striking him with his K-bar knife. McGilvery awoke and began frantically trying to defend himself, but succumbed to his wounds within the first 40 seconds of the attack. Ocampo then hurriedly left the area, unaware that the entire attack had been captured on a local store's CCTV. 1 week later, 42-year-old homeless man Lloyd Jim Middaugh had found a place to sleep beneath an overpass as he was unable to find any shelter for the night. He then read a book before trying to sleep. Ocampo then approached and began assessing Middaugh, who was 6'4" and weighed around 300 pounds, a far more difficult man to overpower than James McGilvery. Whilst Ocampo inspected Middaugh, he awoke and began to get to his feet. Ocampo struck Middaugh in the back and kept going as the man begged for him to stop and tried to defend himself, but Ocampo was unrelenting and stabbed Middaugh around 60 times. Ocampo then left, stopping at a store on his way home to purchase beef jerky to eat, growing bolder with each murder. 2 days later, Paula Smith, who had been in and out of homelessness for a few years, was passing time at a public library in Yorba Smith had previously been living in a rundown home with his girlfriend, but authorities had condemned the home, forcing him onto the streets in between small stints staying with his daughters. When Smith went to leave the library, his bicycle, which was his only mode of transport, had been stolen. Smith then called his daughters asking for a ride. Smith did not realise, but the theft of his bicycle was not just bad luck, but a plan by Ocampo to immobilise him. Smith ventured to the rear of the library to wait for his daughters to collect him after work. Ocampo then attacked from behind while Smith was isolated, displaying the same level of violence he had in his previous victims with the same K-bar knife, only this time in broad daylight. After this murder, the media began reporting on the police investigation into the killings. They had advised the homeless population to seek shelter and mix up their routines. The Los Angeles Times interviewed one homeless man, John Berry, a 64-year-old Vietnam vet, on the 5th of January. In the article it stated that Berry avoided shelters and wasn't afraid of being knifed. Ocampo recognised the area that Berry had been photographed in for the article and set his sights on the man. Ocampo started following Berry around the area. Berry did become aware that something was off and called the police, who suggested that he seek shelter, but he did not. On the 13th of January, Berry was walking with his bike in a shopping centre car park when Ocampo rushed him, knocked him to the ground, and began his attack, continuing to strike with his K-bar knife even after Berry had died. But Ocampo had been hasty in this attack and was surrounded by witnesses, who began yelling and giving chase as he fled. He was pursued by a forklift driver, Danny Hopkins, who was able to call the police and describe Ocampo as he ditched his dark clothing. Police then descended on the area and searched for Ocampo. He was arrested as he calmly walked down the street, trying to act casual, even with blood staining his arms. He did not struggle when he was caught, and was even described as cooperative. When he was detained and searched, a 7-inch knife was discovered. Nearby, police found a bag containing Ocampo's clothing, along with the K-bar knife. Ocampo was taken into custody and charged with John Berry's murder. When interrogated, Ocampo was calm and composed and described each of the murders, declaring that he felt they needed to be done, as the victims were making the state look bad. When his belongings were analysed, it was determined that the K-bar knife found in Ocampo's bag was the same used in the killings of the homeless men, and once a pair of his shoes were analysed, blood was found connecting him to the murder of Eder Herrera's mother and brother. Because of this, Eder was released and would later go on to sue the state for unjust imprisonment with a settlement of $700,000. In court, Ocampo pleaded not guilty due to mental illness, and his trial was scheduled for January 17th, 2014. Whilst incarcerated, Ocampo began hoarding small amounts of cleaning powder used to clean his cell and milk cartons. On the 27th of November 2013, he ingested the collection of powder along with water. Guards soon discovered Ocampo convulsing and vomiting inside his cell, but refusing any medical attention. Shortly after, he became unresponsive. He was then transported to hospital, When his parents arrived, they were advised Ocampo was brain dead, and later that day, he was taken off of life support. Hi there, my name is Urchin. I'd just like to say thank you so much for watching the video. If you do enjoy this sort of content, please think about subscribing. If there is any criticism or any cases that you may want me to take a look at, please leave those in the comments and I'll have a look. Cheers!